I'd like to call the June 14th regular meeting of the City of Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I like it. Scripters.
Enthusiastically, unequivocally.
Real quick, a few reminders, since there are some new faces and some familiar faces as well, that if in the regular public comment or during one of the hearings tonight, if you wish to speak, please make sure you fill that paperwork out and turn it in as soon as possible so that you will have that opportunity. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and start with roll call.
Stephenson.
Here.
Carey. Here. Kimball.
Present.
Davis.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Hampi. Here.
Mr. Manley, ceremonies, announcements, appointments, presentations. Looks like we have a few things to cover.
Yeah, the first one is that there's going to be a joint workshop with City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 22nd at 5 p.m. Location will be at the Police Department Community Room. In addition to that, there's a few national days here. It's National Flag Day, National Army Birthday, World Blood Donor Day, and for a little fun fact, it's National Monkey Around Day.
That's an actual thing.
It's an actual thing.
Actual monkeys.
Yeah.
What you
Okay.
do is on your own time is
Just today.
Just today.
All right. Do we have any amendments to the agenda this evening?
there's none.
Any declaration of conflict, ex parte contacts, or site visits to declare?
No.
No.
Okay, seeing none, then we will move to the consent calendar.
Yeah, so action item A is the minutes from May 25th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Item B is the zoning recommendation of the Jacqueline Prairie Annexation, file number ANNX 12, 2021. Item C is the zoning recommendation for Monjo Meadows Annexation, file number ANNX 3, 2022. Item D is the zoning recommendation for the school district zone change, file number ZC224. And item E is the reasoned decision for Monjo Meadows subdivision, file number SUBD 3, 2022.
Okay. After covering it?
Oh.
I just said that. Yeah. Just
sorry.
went through it.
Just-
Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at this. Any questions?
No.
Look for a motion then.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay. Call for a vote.
Hampi.
Yes.
Ward.
Abstain.
Davis.
Yes.
Kimball.
Abstain.
Carey.
Yes.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay. So we just to clarify, we did cover amendments to the agenda and declaration of conflict, ex parte contact, and site visits, correct?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Sorry.
Nope, it's all good. Citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on an issue that is not on the agenda. Persons wishing to speak have 5 minutes. Comments related to pending public hearings, including decisions that may be appealed to City Council, are out of order and should be held for that public hearing. Is there anyone here tonight with general citizen issues wishing to speak? Seeing none? Okay, then we will move on to number 3, unfinished and old business. We have none.
There's none.
Then that would bring us to our public hearings. We have 2 of them tonight. We'll go ahead and start with the first, which is the zoning recommendation for our Cielo and third annexation. Was I even close?
Cielo.
Yeah, that's close.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Laura Jones, Associate Planner with City of Post Falls, introducing you to the Cielo 3 annexation, case file ANNX-22-6. The owner is Cielo 3 LLC, and the applicant is Lake City Engineering. The requested action tonight is to provide recommendation to City Council on the zoning designation of high-density residential R3 on approximately 5 acres as part of an annexation request into the City of Post Falls. The property is located east of Highway 41 and south of East 16th Avenue, as indicated in red on the vicinity map. The current site, the site is currently developed with a single-family residence, and it is situated over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. The City of Post Falls will provide water reclamation services, and Ross Point Water District is the water purveyor. Looking at the surrounding zoning and land uses, to the north is a single-family residential property within Kootenai County. To the east and to the south are Kootenai County properties developed with multifamily mobile home parks. To the west is previous additions of the Cielo apartment complex, which is R3 multifamily zoning. And then to the southwest is the Ashlar annexation, which is our next public hearing tonight, located on this property, just for reference of where we are for both annexations tonight. Looking at the zone change review criteria, the first is that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. The future land use designation is business commercial, and the comprehensive plan states that this designation promotes a mixture of moderate to high density housing types within walking distance of the city center, neighborhood center, and corridor commercial uses, as well as civic uses and other amenities within Post Falls. And R3 is one of the implementing zoning districts of this land use designation. Additionally, the focus area called out in the comprehensive plan is the 41 North area. And since that's small, I'll read the highlighted portion there for you. It says, as with North Prairie, land values will pressure development to attract a range of residents offering shared amenities, housing variety, and neighborhood scale services, and that this area is guiding development and focused provision for multifamily, commercial, and tech uses near higher classified roadways. Looking at the next review criteria, it's that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. Several of the goals that staff reviewed that may be applicable to the annexation are goals 5, 6, 7, and 14. And those are to keep Post Falls neighborhoods safe, vital, and attractive, maintain and improve Post Falls transportation network on pace and in concert with need and plan objectives, plan for and establish types and quantities of land uses in Post Falls supporting community needs and the city's long-term sustainability, and involve the community of Post Falls in local government planning and decision-making. Policies that help support these goals include Policy 1, and those are to support land use patterns that maintain or enhance community levels of service, foster the long-term fiscal health of the community, maintain and enhance residential quality of life, promote compatible, well-designed development, and implement goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, related master plan, and/or facility plans. And I will cover some of these in the coming slides. Additionally, Policy 2 may be applicable, and that is to apply or revise zoning designations with careful consideration of the following items, including future land use mapping and compatibility with surrounding land uses, which I've kind of touched on in the previous zoning and land use slide. Infrastructure and service plans, which will be on the following slide here. Existing and future traffic patterns, that will be reviewed under Criteria D. And again, the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and related master plan and/or facility plans, which is the section we're reviewing right now. So infrastructure and service plans, as mentioned earlier, the City of Post Falls will provide water reclamation services, and the city has said that they have the capacity and willingness to serve the site. Additionally, Ross Point will be the water purveyor, and the applicant has provided a will serve letter saying that Ross Point has the capacity and willingness, again, to serve the site. Looking at policies 15 and 24, those are to ensure that adequate land is available for future housing needs, helping serve residents of all ages, incomes, and abilities through provision of diverse housing types and price levels, and to plan for and protect transportation corridors from encroachment and preserve adequate rights-of-way for future corridors, including utility facilities. The next review criteria is C. Zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification and traffic patterns, which is in the next slide under review criteria D, existing development and future land uses and community plans, which I've already covered, and geographic or natural features, which would include the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer for this site. Criteria D is that commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. This would include Highway 41, which is a principal arterial, and East 16th Avenue, which is a major collector. Staff has determined that this proposed development should not adversely impact the existing transportation network. Additionally, you can see the proposed 8th Mile Backage Road in blue on this slide, and that is going to be hopefully a future north-south connection. And in yellow here, proposed Zoros Road, which is, and again, a future connection north-south, which will be built out with as a minor collector. Mr. Davis, do you have a question on this one?
Nope.
Okay. The next review criteria is that limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed further away from the higher intensity urban activity area. In red here, you can see our higher intensity urban activity areas. This is the 41 corridor, and since the property is located less than a quarter mile from that corridor, it would be considered meeting this review criteria. Lastly, industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning. This is not applicable. There's no industrial zoning within the area. This is a list of the agencies notified and given a chance to provide comment on the development. We had three three agency comments, and they include Post Falls Police Department. They were neutral. However, they have had recent complaints about parking along 16th Street, so they would like us to keep that in mind during the design approval process at the time of site plan review. Kootenai County Fire and Rescue will reserve comments again for the permitting process and the site plan review, and Post Falls Highway District did not have any comments. Here's again the list of the review criteria, and with that I can take any questions you have.
Can you go back to the Backage Road, the blue one? Would that go right through that other apartment complex, or?
This is the 8th Mile Backage Road that's been proposed. It won't provide total continuity north-south, but it is intended, that's just showing the location of where it would run unless
So-
existing
So where it would
development is
fit, it
already
would
built
fit,
out.
where apartments are, it would, gotcha,
Correct.
or other structures. Okay.
So it would run, but in the blue? Is that what?
It won't actually get built out there until maybe sometime when those apartment complexes go away. I'm not sure if and when that will happen. But the intent is
Like
to
Rob
run
wants to talk.
north-south.
Should we invite Rob up?
Yep.
It's
I'm
more or
not s-
less like a general location.
Right.
Okay.
So like where you have an apartment, you may not get that for some time. So,
Right.
And they can be developed as either a private drive, a public street. There's different ways to attain the 8th Mile Backage
Mhm.
Road. And so, but without having a plan showing a general location, then you wouldn't have anything when you're doing new development on raw land and how to attain it. But
Right.
Rob may have some additional commentary to add.
Actually, I don't have any additional real comment. John covered it very well with the flexibility between parking, between drive aisles and parking lots and actual city streets, so unless
Okay.
you have a question for me.
Do we have questions?
I don't.
So just to clarify, that 8th Mile Backage Road is basically it's similar to what you find on like Highway 95 north by Wilbur, where you've got all the back parking lots and connection in between parking lot to parking lot. Kind of by, is that kind of what we're talking about?
From your frame of reference and knowing what you're talking about, somewhat similar, a little bit more refined so people can actually figure out where they're going. The idea is that when you're going through a parking lot, if you're on one end of it, you would very easily see that it's a fairly straight shot through to the next street or the next parking lot, so that it's intuitive and inviting for traffic to move along those roadways. But being, Bell Cielo 1 and Bell Cielo 2 actually predate the transportation master plan that incorporated the 8th mile backage road. So we recognize that it may not be achievable along the entire stretch of Highway 41, but it is something that we're trying to get. The quarter mile backage road is different. It's been in our transportation master plan for well over 12 years. And whereas the map shows the yellow line for that quarter mile backage road, we actually anticipate that it's going to be a few hundred feet further to the west or closer to Highway 41 and run along the east side of this property in question to get up to 16th Avenue and then continue to the north. So the quarter mile backage road will be a continuous roadway eventually from 12th Avenue to Prairie and then continuing north of there as well.
And that's one reason why we wanted to have both these projects come on the same evening. So you can see the backage road, that yellow area, that it can be planned between these two projects, and you could get from Mullen to 16th eventually through other coordinated efforts.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Other questions? For any staff?
No, I think I'm okay right now.
No? All right. Applicant.
What slide would you like?
Excuse me. Anyone that's overview, that's fine right there. Good evening, Chairman Davis, fellow commissioners, Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, 126 East Poplar Avenue in the city of Coeur d'Alene. This should look somewhat familiar to most of you guys. I think with the exception of Commissioner Ward. I brought this in front of the Planning Commission on October the 8th, 2019. It was unanimously approved for an R3 zone. We then went to City Council the next month. We were denied at City Council, but with a caveat. And the caveat was City Council thought the timing was a little off because of the Highway 41 construction and the fact that the light at 16th wasn't installed yet. The light is in. It's not functioning yet, but it's in. Highway 41's almost done. It's scheduled, correct me if I'm wrong, this summer, late summer, early fall is completion date for Highway 41. So here we are 2 years later bringing this back around the horn. The timing is right now. The only thing that's different from the first time we brought it around is you guys have updated your comprehensive plan. Last time it was designated as residential on the comp plan. Now it's business commercial. Still, the R3 is an implementing zoning district in that land use designation, so nothing's really changed. So I'm going to be brief and go a little bit for an assumptive close because you guys have seen this before and you did approve it unanimously last time I was in front of you. Any questions for me?
Questions at this point?
I just, could you touch at all on the parking? With the police made a comment on that. I mean, you guys obviously are probably aware of that and are thinking of that.
We are aware of it. I wasn't involved in the design of either the first two Bell Cielos, so I can't address the parking there. I did drive out there today to take a look at it, and people do park on both sides of 16th Street, and it is a bit congested. I think the construction that's going on there probably makes it worse because that first several hundred feet of 16th is still torn up and it is gravel, and so I think that's probably exaggerating the problem a little bit. But as Laura had indicated, you know, when we do come back around for site plan review on this next phase, we can certainly work with staff on trying to resolve or provide additional parking if we can do that.
Okay.
Other questions?
No, that was my concern too, is the parking on the.
Yeah.
I know
No,
that,
it's good that staff is aware of it. We're aware of it now, so it's something that we can certainly take a look at during site plan review.
Okay.
Thank you.
Easy enough. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Public comment. Those in favor?
Well, there's one that was not marked,
Okay.
so I'll just bring them both up.
Why don't, yeah, let's just
Okay.
bring them all. We'll go through them. All right, both wishing to speak, was not marked, so we'll go ahead and invite Tom Wilkerson up. Mr. Wilkerson. We'll just have you state your name and your address. And
Tom Wilkinson, 4527 East 16th.
You have 4 minutes, sir.
Okay. It's the parking issue that we're here to address, and right now with the first Bell Cielo, it's extremely obvious that there is not enough parking within the facility for all the people who live there. They're parked on both sides of 16th for as far as they possibly can park. And if the second Bell Cielo is built with the same considerations for parking places per tenant, they're going to be parked out on 16th all the way down into the residential area. So not only is it a traffic hazard, the people coming out of Bell Cielo 1 really struggle to get out onto 16th because they have to pull out so far to see what oncoming traffic is doing, that it's a definite hazard, and it looks bad in the winter with snow and things like that. It creates a problem. If they're going to build multifamily facilities like this, they ought to provide parking on their property, not on the right-of-way, for their tenants. And that's basically what the issue is for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
We appreciate that. Also in opposition, wishing to speak, Samantha Steiglender.
Good evening, Commission. Thanks for allowing me to speak about high-density housing again, which I'm in opposition to again. So I reviewed the packet earlier today, and oh, sorry. Yeah, you can start me there. Thanks. I didn't realize that this had already come before you 2 years ago, so pardon my ignorance there, but I did have a couple of notes. I'm not sure why we consider the mobile homes as high-density housing to make it seem like this high-density housing will be surrounded by housing of the same type, because I don't think that there are as many mobile homes per acre as there are apartment complexes per acre, right, in R3. But that was just one thought. And then I am really kind of opposed to the idea of having like 3 phases like this, especially of R3 coming through. So I thought it said 3, but maybe it has 2, but it seems like they asked for some land that got approved for R3, so that made that piece R3. Then they bought another piece of land right next to it that is now being approved for R3, when maybe we could have just asked for the whole, like, what, 10 to 15 acres, depending on how big that is. I couldn't see from the maps, to just be all R3, and that might have changed public opinion about it at the time that it was approved. Let's see, commercial mixed future use. So it says that that would be mixed, but it seems like that's all R3. There's no commercial involved in any of that, right? So like no twin homes or townhomes. We're always talking about mixed use, especially when we talk about R1 and wanting to put higher density in the R1 area, but now we're talking about a decent amount of R3, but we're not pushing the developer to put in any like of the twin homes or the other types of products that we always talk about in other meetings. So sorry, that was one thought. Okay, so goals, because I know technically we can only talk about the goals and policies and criteria, right? So goals, I don't think that it's attractive. Goal number 3, is it going to stay attractive? No. And then policy 4, so it's not really mixed use because we're talking about all R3. That's not a lot of mixed use in there. I think that also relates to policy 6. And then policy 15, is it going to be diversified? No. Again, it's all R3. We're not talking about putting any other type of product in there except for high-density housing. And then criteria D talked about it being near arterial streets, and so it's what do we say, a quarter mile, which when we say it like that, it's not very far, but if we remember from track, that's one whole time around the thing, right? And like that feels like a lot when you have to walk it. So I don't actually think that this is quite as close to arterial as like we promote when we're promoting something that's right on the 41, trying to get that approved for R3. I think that's all 3 pages of my notes, and I'm not out of time yet, so thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Mr. Dittman, anything to add? In rebuttal.
Thank you, Chairman Davis, fellow commissioners. Parking, we talked about that. We're aware of it. It's something, staff is aware of it. I know it's going to become an issue and a topic of discussion during site plan review because we're all aware of it now. So it's something we'll look at when we get to that stage. You know, the high density housing for the mobile homes, that actually is the zoning designation in Kootenai County. It's high density residential. That's why we're calling it that, because that is the true zoning designation. Why didn't we ask for all R3 up front on all 3 phases of Cielo? And that's because my client didn't own all 3 properties at the time. They've bought them in succession as they've come up for sale and as they've developed them. So we're bringing them forth as we buy them, and we're trying to make it one project. And if you're familiar with that site at all, you know that there is cross connections between phases 1 and 2, and there's actually some stub streets in phase 2 that go into this next property. So we've anticipated the best that we can, and we're trying to promote that connectivity there. So,
Okay.
further questions or any questions for me?
Additional questions for applicant?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, additional questions for staff? Any clarification?
Do we know what, on the first 2 phases, does it meet certain, what is that requirement for parking? 1.5 per unit? or-
It's 2 per unit.
It's 2 per
for
unit,
those.
and they meet that?
They meet that, and one thing is, when you look at some of the aerials with the on-street parking, we can't make people park on the site. We have a public street. So some individuals may be choosing to park within the public rights-of-way for public provided parking in front of their multifamily building, because that may be closer for them to do that than to go inside the facility and park in an internal circulation.
So we're saying, or by saying that, it's kind of an assumption that there is plenty of parking within the condo plats, or I'm sorry, the apartment plat itself, and it's not overflow.
I haven't seen any evidence that our current parking standards isn't sufficient at this point.
In any other places, this is kind of it where we're having the problem.
It's not unusual to see some individuals that live in an apartment project choose to elect to park on the public street near their apartment.
Even if there is parking within
Correct.
Okay, so we really, okay, all right, I'm just trying to
No.
kind of figure out what, because that does become a big problem, especially here in winter, when you have plowing and it can
Right.
really create some hazardous,
Can be extra large
conditions.
construction vehicles, truck and trailers.
Yeah, which I don't know that, but
Sure.
so that's why I was asking those questions, trying to get to the bottom of that, but I don't really know that we can tell for sure.
That is a discussion, though, that staff has started to have internally to
Okay.
maybe further look at our current multifamily parking standards.
Yeah, if maybe that isn't enough, or.
It's not
if we're having-
inconsistent to a majority of jurisdictions, though. 2 is a very
Okay.
common factorial to use for parking per unit.
Okay.
Vicki, did you have a question as well?
No, I think that Nancy pretty well asked exactly what I was going to try to find out.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Hey, John, do we know what % of the city is at R3 zoning, like compared to R1 or 2?
Not
Roughly.
off the hand, I don't know what that percentage. We used to keep track of it, and then that number I currently do not have.
Do we know how much R3 is underdeveloped right now, or under development?
There's not many sites that are zoned R3 that don't get developed. I mean, we have one on the end of Corbin that I know of that is zoned R3. And then we have another one east of Ross Point Road, east of the KFC area, where we do have an approved site plan that's developing, but the vast majority of our R3 is developed.
Developed, or like out by Cabela's, all that's being approved and developed, but we don't have a lot of R3 just sitting around.
No, Montrose has some, in the PUDs, we do have some multifamily that's awaiting some future phase. So they do have a few pockets out there. They've chose to elect to sell some of their areas that are approved for R3 for industrial purposes. So they don't have a lot out there as they once had, but some of the PUDs have pockets of it.
Cool, thanks.
Anything else for clarification?
No.
Nothing? Nothing? Okay. Then I'll go ahead and close out the public hearing, and we will move to discuss review criteria. All right, discussion number one. Amendments to the zoning,
That's the city council one.
yeah.
But the review criteria here is the same.
Okay, and we're back. Amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, future land use map. Discuss.
So in the
believe
future,
Well, it's, yeah.
well, it says a business commercial, but then you gotta look at the focus area.
I was gonna say, staff pulled up the focus area and showed that it was
and
definitely.
so R3 is one of the many different zones that could go in there.
Right, and as a matter of fact, I think R3 is, so I think of the implementing zones, R3 is
The less
probably,
intrusive.
there's R2, then R3, and then everything else is a lot more high intensity
Yeah.
than that. So, because it's CCS, and then there's the
Two.
technology mixed, and
Yeah.
then
Well, they
all
got the two,
those.
would those two smart code ones be more dense, or?
Yeah, those have a,
4 and
those have a
5?
minimum density, smart codes,
Yeah.
which are a lot more dense, for sure.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Let's move to number 2. Amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and the policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. Falls into some of the discussion we just had and some of the things that were pulled up by staff, but further discussion?
Well, I think it does pose problems with maintaining or enhancing the community levels of, I guess, service, or just simply having parking issues and people parking on the road. And I think that does create problems. It creates problems not only for that development, the developments abutting, but the ones down the road that have to travel through that area as well. I think it can make road conditions hazardous at times. So
You jumped to number 3.
Oh, I jumped to number 3, sorry. Okay, put that on number 3.
No, you're fine.
Just go ahead.
No. Anything on the goals and policies with the comprehensive plan?
I think the staff report goes through it, I think, very thoroughly. I think the applicant talks about it in their narrative. And they've identified where there are goals and policies that are met. I mean, obviously, not every proposal is going to meet every policy or goal. It's just there's certain ones that get met and others that are not met. And I guess it's our job to weigh the justification of whether those policies and goals are being met and if those are important. So, and then I think in this case, there's a lot of, we have a housing shortage. We have if we're talking about housing and variety of housing and what's available for people, we have housing where we might have hit the top of a bubble and things are starting to soften a little bit because of interest rates being where they are. And so now it's the delicate balance between, does someone try to buy a house now and decide whether they're gonna buy it now at this price with today's interest rates or at a lower price with higher interest rates. Either way, the barrier to getting into a single-family house at $400,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that's a big mortgage. It's a $3,000 a month mortgage. And the fact that there's a 0% or less than 1% vacancy rate for multifamily tells us that there's a whole lot of people who have a whole lot of places that want to live here. I talked to a lady today who owns a company that had 4 of their 7 employees quit because they couldn't afford to live around here. And the one thing I do know about apartment guys and apartment complexes is that they will charge market rate until they don't fill up, and they'll charge their for-profit businesses, and they'll charge as much as they can until they don't fill up, and then the prices drop. And so right now, when they have a 0 or 1% vacancy rate, they're going to charge whatever they can. And it's important for us to realize that people can put roommates on a rental application, but you can't do that on a mortgage application. So if we want someplace for our workforce to live and not move out of town to a place that's more affordable, then for a lot of people, the only option is apartments. And so having a variety that is not just single family. I understand that it's a lot of apartments and you see them going up everywhere. And the only downside to it is that if they go up and they don't fill up, then rents fall. And then it becomes more affordable for people. And I think that's an important thing to remember, because we have an exodus of a lot of our youth workforce that just can't afford to live here anymore. And I think we're at the beginning of a large problem. And I think it's important for us to get ahead of it. And I'm kind of a long diatribe here, so I'll just shut up. But I do think that that's part of the comprehensive plan goals, is to maintain housing that's available for everybody. So.
Okay. Number 3, zoning is assigned to the following considerations such as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land use, community plans, geographic or natural features. Nancy, continue, because
Well,
I understand where you're.
I think I've said it. I think that is my concern. I do have a concern there with. I think that is a real concern, and I think it is something that we really should start taking into consideration more.
Nancy, I think you're right when it comes to the parking on the street, and I think that if it's appropriate, then staff should look at posting it no parking on the street. That way it's enforceable that way, because we've got a lot of streets that are every residential street's parking on the street, but if there's some spots that aren't, then it can get posted and then it's enforceable.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a
input.
couple spots in town where the streets narrow around apartment buildings due to all the parking, and you have to be careful. There's one off a pole line towards 41 on the north side of the road. It's a pretty big complex that goes up to, it might be Tullamore up in there, but those are all lined with construction. You gotta go up that, it's 3-4 miles an hour in the morning when they're all loading in their trucks and people running out in between the cars and stuff. It's a huge consideration, I think.
Okay. Further discussion? Anyone else? Let's move to number 4. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification.
I think 16th is a major collector, which is the definition of a higher road classification, and it's less than a quarter mile from Highway 41, which is a principal arterial.
Zoros is a minor collector, so.
Right, and that's on the other side, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to number 5. Limited neighborhood commercial, lower density residential zoning is typically for properties as they proceed farther away from higher intensity urban activities.
Not applicable.
Not applicable.
Yeah.
And number 6, industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes situated away from residential zonings, also agreed?
No industrial.
Not applicable. Okay. Any other further thoughts or discussion?
Can I don't know, I don't know if I can ask anything without opening up for discussion again, because I wanted to find out more about the possibility of no parking on the street, how that would work. Can it be a requirement that it's done in the
That's something staff can take care of at site plan.
That's site
review.
plan review, yeah.
site plan? It could
Yep.
be put in a site plan?
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, we're at the initial point that we are simply making a recommendation for zoning to city council. I will echo what some of you have said. I've had multiple conversations, even in the last week, of businesses that are 20 staff short, 15 staff short, 10 staff short, simply because their folks can't afford to live here. And I'm hearing more and more individuals, as odd as it sounds, that are beginning to migrate to Spokane Valley and Spokane just because it's just a little more affordable. So I think the market pushes us towards more multifamily, and
Well, and I don't think that the people who spoke here tonight, they weren't against the apartments themselves. They were just worried about the
The
effect it
parking,
was gonna
yeah.
have, not,
Mostly
not having
the parking.
apartments.
and having the both 1 and 2 already there, it seems like a natural fit. But I think at site plan review, if there are some things that we could do to help tighten restrictions on the parking, it would certainly help.
Right. And I think city staff has the ability to decide that there is no parking on that road, and they can go out and put signs in there. They can have the developer put signs up there for no parking, and I don't know what the typical cross-section for 16th looks like through there, but there's a bunch of major collector cross-sections that don't have parking. So if you look at the city standards. So I think there's backing for all of that. Of course, it's not really germane to the conversation tonight as to what the zoning should be.
Correct.
I think if we're looking at the zoning and we see that it's sandwiched between, we've got R3 zoning to the north, there's R3 to the west, there's multifamily, county multifamily to the east and south. I don't think there's anything other than an R3 zoning that would be the appropriate thing. It certainly isn't appropriate for commercial, being that far away from the highway corridor. It's kind of in that weird little tweener zone. And so when you sandwich it in and you see where it is, I think it absolutely is appropriate for it to be a quarter mile away and to have residents, multifamily residents there that can support businesses that are on the highway corridor.
Any other further thoughts? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Give her a shot here. Thank you. I would move to recommend approval of the Cielo 3 annexation file number ANNX-22-6, finding that the requested zoning of R3 meets the approval criteria in Post Falls Municipal Code 18.16.010 and 18.20.100 as outlined in our deliberation, and direct staff to prepare a zoning recommendation to be provided to City Council.
I've got a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion, and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Hampi,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Evanson.
Yes.
Okay. That brings us to action item B, zoning recommendation and review requests for subdivision on Ashlar Ranch. Go ahead and open that public hearing.
All right. Good evening again, Commissioners. Laura Jones, Associate Planner with the City of Post Falls, introducing you to the Ashlar Ranch Annexation and Subdivision, case files ANNX 0004 2022 and SUBD 0004 2022. The property owner is VS Development LLC, and the applicant is Olson Engineering. There's two requested actions tonight, the first being the annexation, which is to provide recommendation to City Council for the zoning designation of single-family residential R1 on approximately 10 acres as part of an annexation request into the City of Post Falls. And the second action is for the subdivision approval to subdivide approximately 10 acres into 27 lots contingent on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation of this zoning designation and annexation approval from City Council. The site is located east of Highway 41 and north of 12th Avenue, again indicated on the map in the red. Current land use, the site is not being utilized currently, and there's an existing storage building on site. Physical characteristics, it is over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Again, Ross Point is the water purveyor, and the City of Post Falls will provide water reclamation services. Looking at the surrounding zoning and land uses, again to the north, Kootenai County, it's the multifamily mobile home park. To the east and south, there are single-family residential homes within Kootenai County. To the west is, again, a multifamily mobile home park within Kootenai County. To the southwest is where we have our continuity to city property, and that is Crimson King Estates, which is a R1 subdivision. And then to the northwest is the Bell Cielo 3 annexation that we just looked at. The first review criteria is that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. The future land use designation here is transitional, and this area is designated to land suitable for growth, and guidance for the proposed growth can be located within the focus area. The transitional zone does not have implementing zoning districts. So looking at the focus area, it is in East Prairie, and this area is slated for relatively intense residential development and is well positioned to mix development densities to leverage community services and transportation infrastructure. The next review criteria is that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found within the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. A lot of these will look familiar for the last annexation. Here, staff reviewed goals 5, 6, and 7, which are to keep Post Falls neighborhoods safe, vital, and attractive, maintain and improve Post Falls transportation network on pace and in concert with need and plan objectives, and to plan for and establish types and quantities of land uses in Post Falls, supporting community needs and the city's long-term sustainability. Additionally, other relevant goals may be Goal 8 and 14, to protect and maintain Post Falls natural resources, including clean air, soils, river, and aquifer, and minimizing light and noise pollution citywide, and also to involve the community of Post Falls in all local government planning and decision-making. As with the last annexation, Policy 1 may be applicable. It's to support land use patterns that maintain or enhance community levels of service, foster the long-term fiscal health of the community, maintain and enhance residential quality of life, promote compatible, well-designed development, and implement goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, related master plan, and/or facility plans. And we'll talk about those in the upcoming slides. Policy 2 is to apply or revise zoning designations with careful consideration of the following factors, including the future land use map and compatibility with surrounding land uses, which we've just looked at. Infrastructure and service plans will be on the next slide, and then existing and future traffic patterns, again, will be reviewed under Criteria D. And we're currently looking at the goals and policies. So the infrastructure and service plans, again, the City of Post Falls will provide water reclamation services, and the city has stated that we have the willingness and capacity to serve the site. Water, again, will be provided by Ross Point Water District, and the applicant has provided the will serve letter saying that they have the willingness and capacity to serve it. Additional policies that may be relevant include 15, 24, and 27. Ensure that adequate land is available for future housing needs. Plan for and protect transportation corridors from encroachment and preserve adequate rights-of-way. And work to improve street connectivity in all areas of Post Falls, improving walkability, public health and safety, and transportation efficiency. The next review criteria is that zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features. Again, the natural feature here that's prominent is the Rafter Prairie Aquifer. Looking at criteria D and transportation, commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. Again, this includes Highway 41, which is the principal arterial, East 12th Avenue, which is a minor collector, and Zoros Road with that north-south connectivity. And you'll see that in the proposed subdivision plans and how the applicant has worked that into their design. So staff has determined that the proposed development should not adversely impact the existing transportation network, and they base that on the trips per day and what the roads can accommodate.
I say one thing. So that yellow line, that quarter mile backage road, if you go back 2 slides, you can look at policy 24 and 27. So just an example of how our transportation and our master plans play a role with development. So when a development comes forward, we look at our policies and they can help reinforce, get some of the backage road system to improve safety and connectivity long term. And so once again, like she said, when you see the subdivision, you'll see, if you go to the next 2 slides. So that yellow line, as this proceeds on this western boundary to bring a road north-south, then Cielo will once again, they'll take the receiving end of that and connect that up to 16th. And that's how with 2 different development leads to that meeting our master plans.
Anyone have any questions on that while we're on that subject?
Thanks.
I think we're good.
The next review criteria is that limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed further away from the higher intensity urban activity. So this property is located further than 0.25 miles from Highway 41. So it is getting in that area where lower density residential might be more appropriate and higher or further away from the higher intense urban activity area. Criteria F, industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning. Again, it's not applicable here. There's no industrial zoning within the vicinity. Do you have a question, Nancy?
No, I'll ask it. You might answer, so.
Okay. Looking at the proposed subdivision plans, again, the applicant is proposing 27 single-family residential R1 lots. They will be providing that north-south connection of Zoros Road. And for reference, north is to the top of the screen. So right here along that western boundary is Zoros. And they're also going to provide east-west connection of Davin Drive for future expansion if and when that property to the east annexes. And then they will also be putting in frontage improvements along East 12th Avenue. That includes curb, sidewalk, gutter, swales, street trees, lights, etc. So looking at the subdivision review criteria, the first is that definite provision has been made for a water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality for the type of subdivision. Again, as seen in that, with the annexation, Ross Point has provided a will serve letter, and they said they can serve the site. Second review criteria is adequate provision has been made for public sewage systems and that the existing municipal system can accommodate the proposed sewer flows. And again, the cities will be providing water reclamation services, and we have the adequate capacity to provide service to the subdivision, and it is in conformance with the city's water reclamation master plan. The next review criteria is that proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. Again, Highway 41 is the principal arterial. We've got 16th as a major collector, which if Zoros ever goes through to the north, it would connect. And the minor collector of East 12th and minor collector of Zoros. So the subdivision should not have a negative impact on the local transportation system, and the proposed layout does accommodate that future connectivity. Criteria 4 is that all areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and that the proposed use of these areas are compatible with such conditions. The site is located over the Rathrum Prairie Aquifer. However, that does not pose a challenge for this type of development, and there are no known soil or topographical conditions which have been identified as presenting a hazard. Review criteria 5 is that the area proposed for subdivision is zoned for the proposed uses, and the uses conform to the requirements found in this code. It is contingent on annexation approval by City Council, and the subdivision and the proposed lots conform to both Title 17, which is the subdivision ordinance, and Title 18, which is zoning. Oh, excuse me. And you can see with the bulk and placement standards that if R1 is recommended to City Council, the lots will be compliant with the bulk and placement standards of the R1 single-family zone. The last review criteria is that the developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of cost to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigation measures for off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It is the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through the obligation to pay development impact fees. Staff reviews and applies impact fees and cap fees at the time of individual building permits, and those do assist in mitigating the off-site impacts to parks, public safety, streets, and water reclamation. This is the list of agencies notified and given the chance to comment. We had 3 agency comments that include Post Falls Police. They were neutral. Kootenai County Fire and Rescue will be reserving their comments for the subdivision review process, and Post Falls Highway District has no comment. Again, here are the 6 zone change review criteria, and I can take any questions.
So they will be coming in and out off of 12th Street then?
Go back to the plan here. Yes.
Okay, and only 12th Street, there is no other?
Correct.
Right now, okay.
Other questions? No?
No,
Okay.
not right now.
Laura, thank you. Invite the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Terzulli, I'm a project manager with Olson Engineering. I'm located here in Post Falls, here to talk about Ashlar Ranch subdivision and zoning recommendation. If approved, the builder in here will be Anthem Pacific. Jeremy Vohler's with us tonight, owner of Anthem Pacific Homes. And thank you very much for staff. They always do a great job putting stuff together, so I'll breeze over some of the things that Laura had already covered, and then we'll try to drill down on some of the other things that I think would be pertinent tonight. Again, we are asking for annexation to City Council, and you guys will help them see if the requested R1 zoning designation is appropriate, and if the subdivision is in compliance with that R1 zoning designation, and I think we'll prove tonight that it is. So again, that's just the criteria that we are held to when applying a zoning to a particular property. So we start with number 1. We'll go back 1. 1, 2, and 3 are A, B, and C on this. I'll cover in this portion, and then we'll get to D and E more when I talk about the subdivision, and then we'll find that F is not applicable to this request. So is the requested zoning consistent with the future land use map? And just like Laura's slide, yes, we're in this transitional area, unannexed, unincorporated into the city as of yet, but contiguous. So we go into the East Prairie focus area to get guidance from that focus area, and I've pulled some quotes right out of the comprehensive plan, and they're about the same ones that Laura had cited as well. That this constitutes the easternmost edge of Post Falls, immediately abuts land, forecast for inclusion into Coeur d'Alene, and is slated for relatively intensive residential development. I don't read that as intensive meaning high density. I mean that, I interpret that as meaning likely a lot of subdivisions out here. I envision something like Coeur d'Alene Place, not a whole lot of commercial or mixed-use development in there. And then again, to support development patterns that are interconnected, providing pedestrian connectivity to all multi-use paths and trails. So we've talked a lot tonight between the Bel Cielo and this one about connectivity, and I think we can demonstrate how the pieces to the puzzle can all fit together, and actually how good your staff is, your city engineers are at holding the development community to these master transportation plans, that they're not just swinging and letting developers come in and do whatever they want. We actually took a couple swings at the subdivision layout, and it was Mr. Paulus that pointed out that the master transportation plan cites a quarter-mile backage road in there, and we're gonna have to figure out how to incorporate that into our subdivision. So if we look at this slide, on the left, zoomed in on the property, this is gonna be us here, upper right-hand corner. The reason I have this zoomed in one is because, as you can see, when Crimson King was built out on the perimeter there to the north, on the perimeter there to the north, there is a multi-use path that gets us to the 41 intersection that will be a controlled intersection with pedestrian crosswalks over to the multi-use path on 41 that continues to get extended as development occurs north on 41. We also have pedestrian connectivity to the west. Coming in behind these commercial centers here. And then if we move over to the right, this is up here, this little star. You got your multi-use paths moving east and west, getting us over to 41. And if you look at that faint green line, that represents the Centennial Trail. So we've got good access with pedestrian crossways across Celtice, getting folks from here and what is likely to be that intense residential development safely across all major intersections to the Centennial Trails and all 112 miles that encompasses in North Idaho. So next is the sneak peek at our subdivision, and so about the connectivity. Zoros Road was named Zoros Road because if you look to the north in this incorporated area, that was the road named up here. If we're just zoomed in down here, that doesn't mean anything to us. But as it was pointed out by city staff, that is the location of that quarter-mile backage road. That backage road and part of the master transportation plan is to alleviate and give people the ability to funnel onto the major corridors. And so people aren't log jamming at different intersections. So if we take Bel Cielo, and I know they've talked with city staff about needing to reserve property to the east for that future connectivity. We've designed Zoros Road in conjunction with already built Zoros Road. So now we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces to a puzzle that is going to help create that connectivity, to create a truly networked road and street system within the city, which is the forethought of your planners, the forethought of your engineers, and working closely with the development community to make sure that as things grow, and if you look, we could potentially be 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels away from realizing this. And anybody else along here that wants to get annexed in or subdivide, a requirement of their subdivision is going to be dedication of right-of-way and helping build that road, paying their fair share to the greater good of the community, creating this interconnected network of streets. It's just sound city planning, and they do a great job, and they hold the developer to the standard that they've set through that master transportation plan. Question number 2, is the zoning request consistent with goals and policies in the comprehensive plan? This gets a little tricky. As was brought up earlier, the comprehensive plan has a plethora of goals and policies. The policy, well, they're actually very well written. The policies, I feel like, are perfectly written. But there's this disclaimer in the beginning of this appendix that summarizes all the goals and policies found throughout the all 100+ pages of the comprehensive plan. And it states that goals and policies are numbered sequentially, however, that number doesn't indicate any city priority or relative importance. I find that to be such a disservice to this commission, to the council, and to the city as a whole, because how the heck do you enact policy if you don't rank order the goals? If we're just swiping at any goal that shows up, it becomes very difficult to understand how to implement policy, because if goals aren't weighted, and I think we all know that they are weighted. And so I sort of took the liberty of pulling the goals and policies that continue to be brought up meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting on this next slide, because I feel that organically they sort of have rank ordered themselves through these types of discussions. And with a land use action like this, these tend to be the goals that come up time and time again. I've highlighted the areas that I think keep getting talked about, and then further down on the page, I've sort of distilled them down to what it comes down to. Housing, traffic, are my taxes gonna go up, and what the heck do we do with all the people moving here? I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I really think that that's what this boils down to, and it's discussion after discussion. And then I also, on the next slide, I think have summed it up, how everybody truly feels. How do we not become California? It's, why not just lean right into it? It's part of the conversation. It's what everybody keeps talking about. And I think if we're gonna have this conversation, we have to start from a baseline, and we need to be honest about what that actually means and what that could potentially look like. So let's be realistic. Kootenai County, this is from the census. 1990 population 65,000. Current population plus or minus 160,000. Projected growth 10 years, 227. Projected 20-year growth, 304,000. Current population of Orange County, California, 3.2 million. Current population of Ada County, that's Boise, 470,000. So the point I'm trying to make here is, I don't know if we're looking at it and having an honest discussion if we keep saying, I'm going to turn into the place I just left from, because I don't think that that's honest. It took us 30 years to get from 65,000 to 162,000. The projections are for us to double again in 20 years. If we double again in 20 years, and even if we exceed that, let's say that we double again in 15 years, we would still be looking at about 60% of the population, 65% of the population of the Boise area. And anybody that's spent any time in the Boise area can still contend that there are features of Boise that give it a small town aesthetic. I don't think anybody goes to Boise and believes they're in some place in Southern California. I don't believe it's an honest argument to think that that is where we're headed. I can be up on Canfield Mountain looking out over the valley floor and anticipate a 30% growth And I'm not appalled by it. That's a personal feeling. Some people might be. But I just think that we need to be talking real numbers if we're going to have this honest conversation. Do I get 2 15-minute stints because I have 2 actions?
It's together 1 15-minute.
Okay. So if we zero in on those 4 hot button issues that continue to come up time and time again, housing, traffic, population, and taxes. Increasing our housing stock is going to help stabilize prices. That's just a supply and demand thing. If we can create a range of housing products that come to the market, it creates a more sustainable mix, and it's just going to help that imbalance. It should help stabilize things, and I do believe we can handle the growth if we continue to work with staff, engineers, and implement these policies effectively, especially the transportation plan. That diversity of housing products will also help stabilize the tax base. Traffic, I've talked about it a bunch. The transportation master plan will create this networking of streets that will be helpful and will help funnel traffic appropriately. Impact fees are going to be collected to help fund these capital improvement projects in addition to the developer building what they need to in front of their development. The 41 improvements have been designed to accommodate this type of growth to the east. They weren't just planning for what currently exists and what conditions exist today. They're planning for the future in that expansion. Again, the population growth, even with an extra 100,000 people here, we can still feel like a small town. That is a subjective view of it. Stable growth is going to provide an opportunity for additional industries, for additional services, and for additional growth in the commercial sector, which creates long-term fiscal health of the community. Kootenai County is still ridiculously low in their tax levy rates. North Idaho in general, that's based on state averages and national averages. And the market demand is what increases that fair market value, which is what's showing up in our new tax assessed value. As those prices stabilize and come down, that's what the fair market value should show, and that's what our tax assessment should show. So third, is the R1 zoning designation appropriate when considering the streets and the traffic patterns? Again, we talked about connectivity in the master plan. We've got this tiered development shown here that we've talked a lot about. High intensity on the major corridor, commercial. We've got the multifamily components, and if you look to the west, it then starts to tier down to more the traditional single family. And we are adjacent to some single family, and so we would anticipate as this develops to the east that that pattern will continue to lesser dense residential. So here's our subdivision. I've got a minute to go, so we'll move quickly through this. These are much larger lots, creating a diverse, I've come to you with a bunch of different requests for more townhomes, twin homes. We saw Mr. Dittman with his approach for R3. That's going to create that diversity. These are designed to be shop lots. We hope to bring that to the market for that demand. That should help absorb some of this transplant buyers. Will probably be these buyers and move-up buyers. Again, Ross Point Water District has the will serve. The city is going to provide sewer and has the ability to do so. All other criteria in the subdivision have been met. If R1 zoning designation is what is implemented here, we won't be asking for any variances. We're working closely with the city on their master transportation plan. No topographical issues. And again, we're requesting annexation with R1 zoning designation and subdivision approval, finding that it's compatible with the surrounding uses and the development pattern. Sewer and water readily available. Design standards can be met easily. We won't be requesting any variances or deviations from the standards. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. All the conditions provided have been reviewed, and we have no exception to those. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Questions at this time for applicant?
Nope.
No? I think we're good for now. Thank you very much. Public comment in favor, neutral, and opposed.
2 in favor.
Okay. All right, in favor, not wishing to speak, Jeremy Voller. Here's part of the ownership of Ashlar Ranch, available for questions if needed. Thank you very much.
I'll say something quick.
Okay, we'll just have you come up, state your name, address, and we'll give you 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jeremy Voller, 3844 North Pasture View Road here in Post Falls. As stated before, owner of Anthem Pacific Homes. I'm also a member of VS Development LLC, the ownership entity on the project. I just wanted to be here to offer any answers to questions that might be for the product that we're planning on building on the subdivision itself. I was here a few weeks ago with my partner on this project. He's doing the subdivision at McGuire and Grange that you approved, I think in the last P&Z hearing. We're going to be building a similar product to that subdivision that we're doing at McGuire and Grange on this project. Similar lot sizes, little nicer product, something you can fit shops on. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you for the consideration. And then if you have any questions for me from a building standpoint, I'm happy to speak to that.
Any questions at this time? I think so. I think we're good for right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In favor, I'm guessing you wish to speak? Samantha, come on up.
Hi, Commission. I actually am really in favor of this R1. When I was looking at it, it looks like it's, like you could put more units on it based on the zoning than they are, so I think that's fantastic. Shop lots are great. However, a lot of other things were brought up in the presentation that actually don't really have a whole lot to do, I think, with the application. So I would like to speak to those as a resident of Post Falls. So talking about taxes, population growth, and then there was one other thing, but if we're talking about being like California, born and bred, so let's talk about it. California's actually had a law for many years, I think it's over now, but that protected taxes from rising too quickly on their properties, right? So you couldn't just go from one year to the next and have increased value like we're seeing in Idaho and be taxed on it to protect residents and homeowners. So I think that maybe while you're talking about this or thinking about that, that would be worth looking up. Obviously, when I lived there, I wasn't paying taxes for many, many years on my house because I only owned it for a couple years because I was only a grown-up for that long. And then when people are moving here from California and they're saying, let's not make it like California, they're not talking about Orange County where lots of very wealthy people live. Like, they're talking about other counties in California, in the middle of California, like Tulare, like Kings, like San Joaquin, communities that have been overrun with drugs and lots of other really terrible things. So when we're seeing different types of housing being put in, I won't say it, lawyer, because I know that I'm not allowed to. Just understand that we came from a place with lots of that, and that's what we saw, and that's what we grew up with, and that's what many of the people that we knew were drug into. So yeah, we're not talking about Orange County. We're not talking about the Bay Area. We're talking about the places where normal people on normal incomes live, and this is what happens. And then supply and demand. Why do we keep talking about that? How much of supply have we increased in the last 10 years in Kootenai County? And how have the prices dropped at all? We keep increasing the supply. The prices haven't dropped. That's the idea of supply and demand. So I'm not sure what the point is on like the graph where we expect the supply to exceed the demand to have prices go down, but I don't think that it's anything that we're going to be able to reach realistically just by approving everything and building like crazy. And then I do actually have a request, and Mr. Stevenson, you asked it, Stephenson, sorry, it's also Stigliter, not Stigliter, but that's okay. Instead of talking about percentage of Post Falls that is R1 or R2 or R3, could we talk about it in units so we can actually talk about the number of, you asked it like a year ago and I still haven't seen the numbers. Yeah, I'd love to like actually talk about the number of people in Post Falls that are either living in apartment complexes or twin homes or condos or R1, because that's really what we're talking about. Do we really want to have half of Post Falls be apartment complexes and half of Post Falls be R1? I don't think so. I don't think that those are really comparable numbers. So sorry to hijack this particular public hearing, but I think they're doing a great job on this section, and I think it's going to be beautiful. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Applicant, any need for additional information, rebuttal?
Jeremy Terzulli again. Yeah, to her point, these are going to be nearly double the minimum lot size required in the R1 zoning designation. It is a deliberate attempt to put in larger lots with the ability to put a shop in it. So they could have gone more dense and jammed some more units in there. It would have been by right in the R1 zoning designation, as we pointed out, 6,500 square foot minimum lot size, R1.
65.
Yeah, and so again, the reason I brought up the population and the reason that I did the little distillation exercise is because those are the issues that keep coming up time and time and time and time again. And I wanted to point out that even the most liberal projections of population put us in an area that I believe is very sustainable and I believe can directly align with the comprehensive plan's goal to keep Post Falls, to maintain a small town feel and aesthetic in Post Falls. I believe that's very possible while bringing in this growth. I read an article recently that talked about nationally, and I think we're seeing it, and I think that the pandemic exacerbated it, that people are aligning and moving to states that better align with their core values. And so we're seeing sort of this natural shifting of people that want to be governed in more liberal states are gravitating there or choosing not to leave there, and people that have had enough of being governed by liberal states are starting to find states that align with their core values. So I do believe there's an end in sight as people have sort of reshuffled and decided where they want to stay. And so I take those projections to 2030 and 2040 very seriously, and I do think it's sustainable. I think we need to weather the storm, see how this all fits. I do believe that transplants, and I don't use that term to denigrate anybody. I'm just using it to categorize, I suppose, and maybe I shouldn't do that either. But a lot of people that have moved here in the last 3 to 5 years, and I've had conversations with many, after hearings like this, just out on the street, the vast majority of them state reasons why they're moving here that are, in essence, political in nature. Had enough with the public school system, and we're no longer going to take it. A woman I spoke to yesterday was released from her position with the San Francisco Police Department because she chose not to get vaccinated. And so she took a leave of absence as long as she could. And finally, all of her leave was used up, and they said, vaccination or dismissal. That was her choice. And I think we're seeing that more and more and more. So as those people move here, they need to understand, or I guess have an open and honest discussion with the people that have been here for decades, with the people that worked in construction labor in the 90s at $6 an hour, humping bags of concrete and being a mason tender. They need to have a more open and frank discussion with people that were here in 2007 and 2008 when the bottom dropped out. Have a more honest discussion with developers, engineers, and architects that lived through times when 15 or 20 building permits per year were being requested in the city. There wasn't a ton of work in those times, and we muscled through it, and now there is development to be had, and people are expanding their companies, and a diversity of housing product coming to the market I believe is a key component to what we have right now. And then on the tax issue, I ran out of time looking at this, and I was hoping maybe the city attorney could tell me, but I believe we have a cap that just because our assessed values doubled, the tax bill can only go up 3% annually, regardless of the assessed tax value. Is that correct?
Yeah, so cities in Idaho can only take a 3% increase in taxes in any given year. We do have a foregone ability to, the city sets aside a foregone amount of taxes that we could also take as well. The city has not taken a tax increase in the years that I've been here and before, so I don't know when the city's last tax increase was. I think the city took a partial tax increase when we got rid of the street light fees.
Is that the tax levy rate? The tax is, can't increase the rate, I think, is the 3%. Can't
Right.
increase the levy rate.
Yeah, we can't increase the levy rate.
Right, yeah, okay.
So it's my understanding, though, that there's a cap that just because our property assessed value, which is a state law, that it has to be within 90 to 110% of fair market value, but they cannot increase our tax bill to reflect twice the property value. They can only incrementally increase what we will pay in taxes. That was my understanding, and so the point I was trying to make was if we can help stabilize some of this pricing, perhaps our assessed value can better reflect fair market value, that maybe will come back down to this stratosphere, and therefore the tax consequence won't be so severe. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Questions for staff or applicant? Nope. None? Okay, then we'll go ahead and start with the zone change. Annexation and zone change. Number one, amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan future land use map. Everyone agree that indeed this is?
Yes.
Transitional. As transitional, and R1 is a implementing zone.
Okay. Anything else? Let's move to number two. Consistent with the goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan.
The one thing that jumped out at me was just being able to extend the infrastructure for the city as development grows out in that area. And that was policy 2.
Yeah, James, I think that's kind of an underappreciated part of the comprehensive plan is how the development, the little pieces, even though they're little 5 and 10 acre chunks, the little pieces come together eventually. And it, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't come out of the taxpayer's dollar or taxpayer fund to build it. So I think it's an important thing to recognize.
Okay, number three, zoning and is assigned following consideration of such items as street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land use, community plans, and geographic or natural features.
Yeah, I think it flows along from commercial to multifamily, high density, and then now to a lower density, which is what our plans are.
And I think, one of the things that wasn't really brought up is that this is the third time we've seen this. I think the first time was a request for multifamily, the second time was R2, and now this is an R1. And as it has, there's not too many people out there talking. There was nobody in opposition. When prior there was a lot. And the existing zoning, the traffic patterns, they're going to pave 12th, extend the pavement on 12th. Highway 41, there's good traffic, ability for traffic to get out to Highway 41, and those improvements are in process, and I think it all works very well for an R1 zoning.
Okay, let's move on to number four. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. I think this is not applicable. Agreed?
Yes.
Agreed.
Number 5, limited neighborhood commercial and lower density residential is typically assigned to properties as they proceed further away from higher intense urban activities.
I think that we are getting further away from that Highway 41 corridor, even though it's not that much further away than what we were just talking about. It is kind of starting to get tucked up against the hillside, which is kind of lends itself towards a more residential, single-family character.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Let's move to number 6. Industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning, not applicable. So, unless there is more discussion to be had, I would entertain a motion for recommendation for annexation.
I will move to recommend approval of Ashlar Ranch zoning, file number ANNX-0004-2022, finding that the requested zoning of R1 meets the approved criteria in the Post Falls Municipal Code as outlined in our deliberations, and direct staff to prepare a zoning recommendation of R1 to be provided to City Council.
I second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for vote.
Stevenson?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Hampi?
Yes.
All right, let's move on to review criteria for subdivision. Number 1, definite provision has been made for water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality for this type of subdivision purpose.
The will-serve letter from Ross Point Water District takes care of that.
Pretty much takes care of it all. Number 2, adequate provisions have been made for public sewer systems and existing municipal systems can accommodate the proposed sewer flows.
Yeah, it would be city sewer with adequate capacity.
Okay. Number 3, proposed streets that are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, but.
We did. Zorro,
We
both
did.
Zoros and 12th are going to be our major components, and then the local streets also meet those requirements.
Okay. Number 4, all areas of proposed subdivision which may involve soil and topographical conditions present hazards and have been identified. The proposed uses for these areas are compatible with such conditions. I know the applicant addressed it. Anything else to add?
I don't think there was anything identified by
Wasn't
anybody.
anything.
Nope.
No.
Number 5, area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to other requirements found in this code.
So assuming R1 zoning, it meets all the lot size and bulk and placement table found in the R1 zone.
Okay, anything else to add?
Nope.
Number 6, the developers made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of the cost of providing services by paying fees, furnishing land, and providing other mitigating measures for off-site impact to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It's the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through the obligation to pay development impact fees. I think we had hit this, but anything else to wrap up on?
Not only are they building 1,200 feet of Collector Street, but they're also going to get the opportunity to pay impact fees.
The opportunity. Anything else to add? Other thoughts? Okay, hearing none, I would look for a motion in regard to subdivision review.
Okay, I move to recommend approval of Ashlar Ranch subdivision SUBD-0004-2022, finding that it's consistent with a comprehensive plan and adopting the findings, conclusions, and conditions 1 through 9 contained in the staff report with the requested zoning designation of R1.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, call for a vote.
Hampi?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
All right. Other than readdressing the National Monkeying Around Day, is there any administrative or staff reports?
Done.
Okay, commissioner comments, anything for the good of the order?
Nope.
Again, just a reminder, workshop on the 22nd, hope to see you all there. And if there is nothing else, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
So.